Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I'm Josh Hallman.
Today we're talking about industry terms. What are some of the more popular ones? Who says them to you? What the hell do they mean?
Yeah. And we're going to deal with Mercury in pre-retrograde.
Yep. We are dealing with that apparently today.
No. This is going to be great. This is going to be a great episode. I feel it. It's early in the morning for both of us.
Oh, yeah.
People are drilling things next door. It's going to, everything's going great.
It's great. It's perfect. Did you want to start with This Week in Writing?
I do have something to say.
This Week in Writing.
I recently saw the most popular movie in the world, the Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
I feel like every now and then I complain about theaters and just movies and stuff. So here it goes again. I went and saw the Mario Brothers movie. I'm sitting at the AMC Century City at the Century City Mall. I don't know why I keep going back to this theater. I'm sitting back there with my daughter. The movie starts. After 25 minutes of trailers, the movie starts. We're 15 minutes into the movie, and the movie just stops. The lights, everything turns off. It's just dark in the theater, and people started to freak out, like mob mentality freak out. Everyone starts yelling, what? Like as if this has never happened in the history of movie theaters. And then one guy next to, like, the row ahead of us, who is in his, like, 30s to 40s, starts stomping like a child. Like he went down the stairs to go tell someone. He's like stomping down. And then some woman comes in. She's like, the movie's going to start again. Sorry, give us like 5 to 10 minutes. And then everyone starts yelling at her. It was quite, maybe not everyone, but like a good portion of the theater. It was quite the experience, Tasha. So I saw the Mario Brothers under that setting.
Oof, what a crowd to then watch it with after it came back up.
I know, they stopped laughing.
Oh no, no one was laughing?
I was laughing.
They were so angry. Everyone's angry.
Everyone's
except
angry.
Josh.
I was like, let's go!
How'd Amelia handle it?
She was a little anxious.
Yeah.
I was like, you sit down. You shut up. You watch this.
Has she played Super Mario Brothers at all, or Mario Brothers?
She's played
Mario Brothers games.
Mario Kart, and so she's familiar. And I feel like Mario is like the perfect movie for people who grew up with it and now who have kids. And it's no wonder it's such a sensation. I do have some notes on the movie, but I won't get into that now because it's still a little early, and I'm not sure everyone has seen it.
Okay.
I just want to say I feel like it was like one step away from being incredible.
Truly great.
Truly great.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's just, this is turning into my therapy session, but okay.
No, it's every episode is a Josh theater experience, and I'm here for it.
Okay.
You're keeping movies in theaters single-handedly.
I am.
I know. I believe it.
I take a lot of pride in that.
I guess I have one, and then we can get into our topic, if that's okay.
That's great.
So, Christopher McQuarrie, the incredible director of Mission Impossibles and the writer of Top Gun Maverick, he wrote Edge of Tomorrow. He wrote, what else did he write? He wrote
The Usual Suspects.
The Usual Suspects. I mean, he's a big time deal in our business. He tweeted something that I found rather interesting. Someone had reached out to him on Twitter to ask what makes a script good to invest in from a studio perspective, speaking about spec scripts. And Chris replies, in 30 years of making movies, I have never once managed to sell a screenplay to a studio. And I just felt like that needed to be shared because that is so important for us to remember that selling specs is just one path to making movies and to having a career in this industry.
Yeah.
And you can get into the business through open writing assignments, through being hired to adapt an IP. I guess that's the same thing as a writing assignment. Rewrites. So you can rewrite a script, and you can maybe rewrite it so much that it becomes yours, and that's how you get your first start. Or maybe you just rewrite it and it's not yours. Maybe you don't even get a credit, but you did so good on the rewrite that everyone in the studio is like, we need to give this person another job, and then it snowballs from there. In other words, you don't have to sell a spec in order to make it, and I want everyone to know that, because I know a lot of us feel pressure to sell specs. I know a lot of us feel like we're failures if we're not doing that, but you don't have to do it.
Well, you don't have to sell a spec, but you do have to write a spec, right?
You do need samples to get out into the industry.
Yeah.
Yes, but if you don't sell it, it's okay. It's a calling card. It becomes your business card, essentially.
Yeah. I would love to have him on.
I honestly feel like every successful screenwriter we've had on this podcast has, like, with a storied career, right, has not sold a spec. I feel like that's the case. And I'm speaking very generally, but it feels like that.
Maybe the difference is he's a director as well.
Yeah.
And because I swear The Way of the Gun, well, who knows? Because he wrote and directed The Way of the Gun. I thought that was a spec that he probably just got financing for. But anyway, who cares? Who cares? Well, we care. This is what we're talking about. Yeah, that's a good reminder.
That's all I got.
Okay.
I'm ready to get into our topic today, which I find fun, which is maybe sick, but I do.
You sounded like so excited. And like,
Look,
it was the
I
most
haven't
fun.
had my coffee yet. I went to bed late, got up early. I went and saw 1776 last night.
1776?
The musical about the Declaration of Independence.
I think that was called like Hamilton, right?
Ugh, gross. 1776 is so much better.
Oh my God. All right, let's go into the main topic.
All right, industry terms. Now this came up because I had a call with an executive, and she was using these terms that I was familiar with except for one. And then I realized I'm only familiar with the others that she mentioned because I've been in the business long enough that I've heard it long enough that I started to gather what they were. And I have a feeling that a lot of writers are too nervous or embarrassed to ask what these terms mean if they're being told them by producers or execs or agents.
Yeah.
So I just thought we would talk about some of them because they're also always changing. There are some standards that I've heard throughout my entire career, but the one that was used was, I was like, what? I mean, I get what that means, but interesting. You're just inventing new terms. And then I started asking some producer friends around the business about terms that they use, and they started sending me some wacky ones, some really, really interesting terms that I've never heard, some of them, and some that they just love because it's a shorthand to an idea to convey to a writer after reading their script. And so anyways, I'm rambling, but I think this is a great topic for us to explore.
I agree. And I can't wait to call out the terms that are kind of used for when people just want to sound cool and they're like, they just use a stupid term when you're like, you could have just said something else.
Oh man. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
I'm
in a great mood. Let's go.
Shit.
No. I'm good.
All right. Let's start with the first one that you hear very, very often, and I've heard ever since I was an assistant and sort of had to learn what it was when I was an assistant at Universal, is a tentpole movie.
Yeah. My favorite.
Yeah, I mean, it's your favorite. Yeah, it's some of my favorite kind of movies. And a tentpole, if you imagine like a circus tent, the tent pole in the middle holds up a huge circus tent that includes everyone. It's so big that it includes the performers, it includes families, it includes single people who are just coming to eat popcorn and watch a lion jump through fire. It's all encompassing. So when you say a tentpole movie, it is sort of this big movie that can include everyone, but also is exciting, right? Tentpole of a circus, I think that's also part of what tentpole means. And that's part of what draws everyone in, right? Everyone who goes and sees a Marvel movie sees it because it's an event movie, right?
Yeah.
It's so big. It's got so much spectacle. It's got so much heart. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You're going to gasp in your seat. That is really what a tentpole movie is.
Yeah, I have nothing more to add. That's correct. I just want to add one more thing.
Okay.
Is that tentpole movies, I feel like, used to be rare. They'd be like the summer releases.
Yes.
Now everything, it used to be 90% normal movies, 10% tentpole movies. Now it's like 90% tentpole movies, 10% other movies. So it's almost like inverted just because of the way the industry is. And that doesn't happen. I'm just bringing that up just to bring it up because I just think it's important. But yeah, I remember when movies would get released, like some big Spielberg epic, and it would be like, this is the tentpole summer movie.
Yeah.
And now it's like, this is a monthly release.
It's very true. I don't like it. And I love tentpole movies, but
I love tentpole movies.
That's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, good. We're easing into this. I feel like this is good. Another one of my favorite type of movies. Hey, Tasha, we need a 4-quadrant movie from you.
You got it, boss.
So, Tasha, I don't understand. What did I just say? What is a 4-quadrant movie?
4-quadrant movie is it's the same as a tentpole movie, essentially. A 4-quadrant movie is a movie that includes everywhere. The quadrants refer to like boxes of audience types. So 4-quadrant is it's going to include, young people, like children. Families can go see it. So that's a quadrant. Another quadrant would be, like males from 18 to 45. There's actual like specific data about what these quadrants are that I don't pay attention to. But so producer listening to this is like, Tasha's a moron. It's not 45, it's 35, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's each quadrant is a specific audience type, right? And 4-quadrant means everyone's coming to see this movie. It's all 4 audience boxes, essentially, are going to come see this. Older people, middle-aged people, men and women, and families. They're all going to come see this movie. Mm-hmm. So what's a 4-quadrant movie, in your opinion, that we've...
I was just thinking, I was trying to think, like, okay, what's a 4-quadrant movie? What's a 4-quadrant movie? But I was thinking of, like, a Christmas movie.
I feel like Spider-Verse could fall into both tentpole and 4-quadrant. Like, kids will go see Spider-Man in Spider-Verse. Yeah. Adults will go see it because fucking Spider-Man is awesome. But yet it's animated. And so, yeah, again, kids can see it. But it's new and kind of edgy. So that makes adults want to go see it as well. It does not quite maybe bring in the older audience. I wonder if, like, Top Gun Maverick falls into that. I was just going to
say Maverick. Maverick has to be a 4-quadrant movie. I know we're just talking about terms, but 4-quadrant movies are really hard to nail. And I love them because when it does happen, it's like this perfect alchemy of a movie that comes together, and you're like, oh, this is a perfect movie.
Yeah, it's tough because like you're saying, speaking about the writing aspect of it, like, for example, a Tomb Raider movie actually would be a 4-quadrant tentpole movie. You want everyone, like, my dad should be excited to go see Tomb Raider, and he's 82. Mm-hmm. And your daughter at 8 should be excited to go see a Tomb Raider movie. So that's hitting all the spots, right? Men, women who are adults should be excited to go see this action movie starring this awesome person. But what makes Tomb Raider a 4-quadrant is there's not a lot of violence. Mm-hmm. So, like, not a lot of blood or gore, rather. So there's violence. We're beating people up. We're having action sequences. But there's not a lot of blood. There's no sex. There may be some innuendo, but there's not going to be any sex that kids can pick up on, really, but just enough maybe for adults to pick up on it. And there's going to be heart to it. So there's going to be an emotional story that can make adult audiences actually, like, pay attention and carry through the emotions that are driving the story forward. And then it's fucking exciting. So it's going to meet those people's expectations who are just here to see a fun movie. So it needs to have all of those things. So not only is it 4-quadrant in terms of, like, the 4 audience boxes, it's kind of 4-quadrant in terms of, like, the boxes it needs to tick for you as a writer and like the elements that you're putting into it. So it is a tough movie to write, but that is essentially what it is.
I love 4-quadrant movies.
They're great. They're awesome. Popcorn.
Yeah, get out the popcorn.
All right. This is a new one that
Yeah.
I've only recently heard. We want this movie to be PG-13 but punching up.
This was the first time I'd heard this when you had written it down. And I'm assuming it's a PG-13 movie, but is very close to an R-rated movie.
Yeah. It's so, like, I'm like excited by this term because it's
I am
so
too.
clever.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly what it means when you hear it. You want a PG-13. Yeah, it's going to hit that rating. It's not going to have too much gore. Like I said, it's not going to have too much sex. But punching up, like that, like the word punching tells you exactly what it is. We're like thrusting upwards. We're really like testing those limits in terms of what the action can do and the violence and the sort of character. I'm just excited by it. I'm a weirdo.
Honestly, I'm excited by it too because I feel like it's almost like a perfect movie. Because I like when you can straddle that line and be like, this is a PG-13 movie. It's not, because I've written R-rated movies that are only R-rated because of like one or two things. And those one or two things are really necessary, but I don't want something to be PG-13. So if you take it out, it like changes the movie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I love the punching up.
Me too. I'm super into it. Can you think of is Maverick a PG-13 punching up? That feels like PG-13 punching up.
So far, Maverick has been our tentpole movie. It's been our 4-quadrant movie, and it's a PG-13 punching up movie. I was thinking of the movie Uncharted.
Yeah.
With Tom Holland.
Sure.
But movies like that where you get adventure movies,
Yeah.
it gets very close because people die in those movies. And
Yeah.
it's just a matter of showing how people die. So a lot of times they fall off of things or, you can't like shoot somebody in the face
Yeah.
and have a PG-13 movie.
Yeah. Ready Player One is another example to me of a movie that is all of these things. Tentpole, 4-quadrant, PG-13, punching up.
Yeah.
There's a tone in Ready Player One that feels sort of grittier and realistic versus, say, Uncharted, where like even just the way it's shot, like the colors are brighter, the light is brighter. There's something sort of happier about that movie.
Yeah. Super 8 is also a very good example of that because they have PG-13 punching up because in Super 8, there's a monster killing people. We think, only to find out that monster, spoiler alert, is just taking them into like a cave and putting them in a cocoon.
Yeah.
Whereas if that was an R-rated movie, we would see the monster just killing people.
Yeah. We'd see heads being eaten off for sure.
I love tentpole 4-quadrant PG-13 punching out movies. I
This is our jam.
This is our jam. This is our sweet spot.
It's our wheelhouse here. All right, the next one.
Hat on a hat.
We say this a lot in the writer's room. Hat on a hat is, are you putting too many things in the mix on this to the point where it feels cluttered? So let's say I have a character who's a former FBI agent, but he's also he's moved into the CIA, and he's a recovering alcoholic who also has a daughter who was killed in his past, which is really traumatic. And he's also a veteran. And by the way, he has a terminal illness that's causing him to shake. You're like, I get that you're trying to create a character that has trauma and that has like a sort of dark backstory that needs to become a hero, but maybe that's a hat on a hat. Maybe just pick like two of those things.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not former FBI, he's just CIA and then has a drinking problem, and maybe get rid of the daughter, maybe. Or, just pick one. So if you're trying to do too much, that would be a hat on a hat. And also that can apply to action sequences sometimes. If I'm trying to think of an example, like let's say, I feel like every Fast and Furious set piece is a hat on a hat.
I think that's what makes that's what, first of all, this is now 2 weeks in a row that you have come after one of my films, one of my franchises, and I'm not happy about it. I can't give a good example.
It's hard to think of examples on the fly, but yeah, hat on a hat can apply to absolutely everything. It can apply to how you're building your character. It can apply to how you've built your scene. So like an example might be our character walks into a bar and gets in a bar fight, but also gets a call from his mother that his dad died. And you're like, well, do we need both those things in this moment? That feels like a hat on a hat. It feels like you're trying to give us, like, hit the audience in the face with your point. And actually, one hat is probably good enough. Yeah. You probably don't need two sombreros. You just need the one.
Yeah. Another example, I actually got this note on something where it was like one of my characters was figuring something out. So it was supposed to show how capable this character was. And then at the same time, they did another capable thing. Or, excuse me, directly after that, they did another capable thing. And it was like, we're good. You just needed to see this one capable thing. Now we can move on. You don't need to just keep hitting us over the head with it.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Hat on a hat.
Yeah.
Great.
It's a hat on a hat.
This next one of my favorites, one that I learned from you years and years ago. The note behind the note. The note behind the note is essentially when someone gives you a note, but that note isn't really hitting the direct problem, and there's a bigger issue at hand. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm not really too sure why Tasha walks into this bar and she takes a shot. I don't like that moment. You're like, well, why don't you like that moment? And like the note is related to, she wouldn't be drinking. She's a recovering alcoholic. So like something like that.
Yeah, or like something that happened in your first act is bothering them about this moment.
Yeah, the note behind the note. There's always something bigger.
Note behind the note. Yeah, so I would say typically when you come across a note that pisses you off, that you think this person is stupid who gave me this note, there's probably a note behind the note to that one.
Yeah.
Like the ones that trigger you, there's going to be a note behind the note. So think about what they're actually having a problem with and use your writer brain. And this is why they hire you, not to just do their notes. It's actually to find the note behind their note, right? They want to be able to say, I don't think this, or I got one recently, so I'll just use that as an example, where I got a note where it said, the villain should show up earlier. The villain shouldn't come up here because we're not going to be invested in this movie until the villain comes into it. So you need to move the villain up. And that's a really hard note to hear, that you're not invested in my movie until you hit the villain. But the note behind that note, because it pissed me off, so I had to look at it, was actually that I looked at what made them so excited about the villain coming in this moment. And what's so exciting is it feels like the adventure of the movie really kicks off and starts hitting its stride once the villain comes in, because that's when the actions really starts. That's when we understand what the adventure of the movie is going to be, what the promise of the premise of the movie is going to be. And so I realized I don't want to bring my villain in earlier because I want this opening to really be about my main character. So if their solution is to bring the villain in earlier, I think that's wrong. I think the note behind the note is, I'm not investing in your movie early enough. So I'm going to change the opening and make it more exciting and give you more of what you think you're getting with the villain, but I'm going to bring it in earlier. And that actually solves the note.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a note behind the note.
That's a great example. And I think you're absolutely right. The ones that really trigger you are the ones that you kind of have to look at and be like, okay, what's this? And you actually brought up another really good point that it kind of getting off of industry terms a bit, but when you get the note behind the note, it is okay to not take their note, but fix something else that you have solved. And like exactly what you just said, I'm having an Act 1 issue, so I'm going to go fix that instead. I feel like a lot of times we get a note and we're like, all right, well, I guess I'll introduce the bad guy earlier, because you're just getting it. It's like the producer or the executive or whoever. And so that was a really good example.
Yeah. Can I just say I've known, there's one in particular writer that comes to mind as you were talking, who is the kind of writer who would just do all of the notes that they were given without thinking about the note behind the note. And their movies were always so loved at the places that they sold. He sold a lot of scripts. But then as soon as he started addressing notes, because he would just do what they told him to do, it stopped being liked by the executives, which is so ironic, right? The executives who are giving you the notes, you give them what they want, and they suddenly don't like your script anymore. None of those movies ever got made for him. It's because he wasn't doing the note behind the note. And I guarantee you, I know it feels scary to seemingly ignore a note, but if you do it smartly and you do it like we're talking about here and you turn it in, the executive is going to think that you are brilliant. They're going to love you all the more, and they're going to be like, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so much.
And then when you turned it in, did you give a heads up? Like, hey, I didn't address your note. However, I did address some things in Act 1, which I think solved the problem.
I do actually. I do let them know that because it's respectful, right? It's saying, I hear you, but I actually think the problem is over here. So let me fix that and let me see if that fixes your problem. And it might come back like, no, it doesn't fix my problem. I still need the villain to come in earlier. And then I'll continue to look at what's wrong with the story that makes them feel this way. But yeah, you should respect them, but also be smart about it as a writer.
That was great.
Note behind the note's my favorite.
Likeable. That's the next term.
Likeable. Yeah, and that's usually towards characters, right? So is your character likable?
Is your character likable?
Can you make your character more likable?
Is this self-explanatory?
No, actually. I don't think it is, because I think we tend to be like, oh, you want them to be more well-liked. So let's say I am writing... I'm just going to stick with the Maverick example here.
This something just happened to me in one of my
Really?
scripts. Yeah.
Okay, you share first.
Okay, I'll share my moment. So basically, I'm working on a script that takes place on a train. The character is walking, one of my characters are walking through a train, and in the original draft that I had, a passenger drops something, and the flight attendant, who's really frazzled, like starts to pick it up, and my character's like, pats her on the back. She's like, it'll get better, like makes some joke about it, and then kind of like keeps moving because she has to, kind of survey the train. And I kept getting this one note that was like, this character is not as likable. Like more like there was a note behind the note. And so we ended up changing it where it was so small too. She helped pick up the stuff that the passenger dropped on the floor. So she picks it up, and then she has this conversation while she's gathering all these things. She talks to the passenger, the flight attendant. They have a moment, and she moves on. And weirdly, it changed things. It was like I hate to say, it was like a save the cat moment. Just this little thing that just made her character a little more likable in that moment.
Yeah. You just used an industry term within an industry term definition. Save the cat.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to address that note. But
that's
I also think
micro, by the way. Micro. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's fantastic, because it is those little shifts that you can do that are kind of little tricks in your toolbox to suddenly make a character likable. But I think likable, and on this list that we have in front of us, it's likable in quotes. So what it's actually referring to, I think, is when you have sort of an anti-hero, let's say, and the note comes back that this character's not likable, and you're like, well, they're not supposed to be likable. Deadpool just kills people willy-nilly and is an asshole. And if someone's like, well, we need to make him more likable, it's like, what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean as an audience member, I need to love this guy because he's an anti-hero. You're not supposed to love him. He does things that you don't like. But he has to be a character that I want to sit for 2 hours in a movie theater and watch. Or if it's a show, 8 hours of watching this character, even though they're kind of unlikable. I think Joel from Last of Us, Pedro Pascal's character, is a great example of this as well. He is kind of a jerk. He doesn't like Ellie, this poor teenage girl that he's trying to help. He has no interest in being close to her. He is rude to her. He's cruel to other people. He kills people. But there's something so likable about him that you root for him. And I think that's what the note means. And the reason why I brought up Maverick earlier, I was thinking of John Hamm's character in that movie, where he is meant to be sort of the equivalent of like in a cop movie. It's your police chief who is kind of your obstacle in the movie. John Hamm plays an obstacle to Maverick's character. He doesn't like Maverick. He doesn't want Maverick here. He's only doing this as a favor to his buddy Iceman. Yeah. And he is standing in Maverick's way of doing a good job. But what makes Jon Hamm likable, I think, are small moments where, for example, he loves Iceman. And Maverick loves Iceman, and we love Iceman. And the fact he loves Iceman means that I kind of trust this guy. There's also moments later where it's clear he cares about the cadets that are in this program. Mm-hmm. And then there's another moment where when Maverick actually does the job well, he like proves to everyone in this kind of impromptu moment that he can do the job. Jon Hamm allows himself to be humbled and says, okay, I don't like you, but you can do the job, so I will allow you to continue doing it. So there are moments where you're able to peek through this asshole, basically. Yeah. And it's probably not the right metaphor to be using there. And see that there's a person that you care about, that has feelings, that's relatable, that you can actually like. So likable with quotes around it does not mean make your anti-hero or your villain, whoever they're giving this note about, just so wonderful and likable and make them a hero if they're not a hero. But it means, how do you allow the audience to access them so that they want to root for them and want to watch their story unfold? And this is a really hard one. I feel like now as we're talking about it, there's a whole episode in here about how to make like an anti-hero likable.
I was thinking about this too. And a lot of times I think, Jon Hamm's not a villain in Maverick, but you're absolutely right. He's an asshole, but he's likable. But a lot of times with villains, or you just have to, if you can identify where they're coming from, so the reader or the audience understands, okay, I get why Jon Hamm's like this. Like, they don't want Maverick there. I think that's kind of leaning into making someone a little bit more likable if you can just kind of understand their position. Mm-hmm. But this does sound like a full episode, because that's a tough one.
Yeah, we'll definitely break this down. It's a fun one, and use cool examples from actual movies and shows. Okay, packaging is the next term, which I wouldn't have put this on here if a producer hadn't recommended it, because I actually thought this was fairly self-explanatory, but it might not be actually. So if someone says, Josh, I love your script, I love your train script, but before we try to sell it, I want to package it first. What does that mean?
Well, that's exactly what's happening right now. What that means is we're trying to come up with a quote unquote package, meaning a director, an actor, and an actress to put on a nice platter to someone who will purchase it and say, hey guys, we have all of the pieces here. All of these people are invested in the movie. We're going to make this movie. We just need you to buy it.
Yeah.
Here you go. And it's essentially just putting the pieces together, the main pieces together, to make a movie. Yeah.
And it's usually, I think, when you say package, to me, that always means a director and an actor. So it doesn't have to be a director, actor, and actress. In your case, your movie's a two-hander, so I guess that makes sense. But it could also be a package with just like the actress and a director if it's a stellar actress. Yeah. And the idea behind that is exactly as Josh said, so I don't really want to repeat it.
No, that's great.
But it makes it easy for someone to say yes, right? Because I see that you have Jennifer Lopez attached. Well, Jennifer Lopez, I can look at my numbers of previous movies she has done internationally and domestically and see how many millions of dollars I have made or other people have made from a Jennifer Lopez movie. And I can kind of bet that I'm probably going to make somewhere in that range with your movie if she's attached. So now this is a nice little neat package that I can say yes to.
Yeah. This actually kind of rolls nicely into the next one, which is needs an attachment.
It's the exact same thing.
Yes, but I feel like a package is exactly what that is. Here is the full package.
Yeah.
Or there's more of something, but needs an attachment is, all right, it has an attachment, has a director, but we don't have an actor or an actress.
That's true. Yes.
So it could be like one of the components.
Yeah, not a full package.
Not a full package.
Yeah.
You know what's part of the package? The fucking writer. There's an attachment. Me.
Oh, shit. Oh, man. The next one is, this one gutted me. This one is not one I would have thought of. This is what a producer gave, and it makes me sick just even thinking about it. So
this hurts.
He suggested well told, quote unquote, regarding someone you've pitched to saying it back to the writer after you've pitched. thank you. Like, that was really well told. And I've been told this many times.
Me too. Up until this, I was like, well told.
Yeah, that's great. That means they love how I pitch. And he was like, no, well told, if you're being said that as a writer after your pitch, means we don't like it. It's a pass for us. Thank you very much. But they don't have anything else to say because they don't like it. So they just say, thank you. That was well told.
Yeah.
Because it's the only compliment they could come up with because they don't like your pitch.
Yeah. That's how, I mean, yeah. I don't, there's nothing, this just hurts.
Gosh.
There's really nothing to say about it.
Small story. When I first pitched my very first thing in the industry, and it was a pilot called, do you remember my Afterlife pilot?
I do.
Yeah. It was a woman who died, and she goes to the afterlife, which is like a kind of like the MIB, kind of a bureau where they go and they help other people who are about to die and make the transition, basically. And so I pitched this around to all the networks, and this was insane for me. I was so new as a writer. John Rogers was attached as a producer of the project, so there's that attachment aspect to it. Mm-hmm. And he was kind enough to let me do the pitching, and he could have easily gotten in there and did it and probably sold it, but he wanted, I guess, me to have the experience. And pretty much every place I went to, they're like, that was well told. And I remember one executive in particular at this really huge office complex that was very, very intimidating. He just leans over to me after the pitch and he goes, that was well told. Your mother must be proud of you. I was like, why are you bringing my mom into this? Like, you must think I'm a child who just like stumbled in here.
Oh, I remember that story.
It was so embarrassing. And you can tell he was like, you're on your way, girl, but you're not there yet, was kind of what he was saying.
Your mother must be proud of you.
Yeah. Well, but the sad part of the story is I didn't understand this yet. Like, I feel like my gut said something is wrong, but most of me, like 85% of me, was like, this is amazing. This guy just loved my pitch so much that he said my mom must be proud of me. So as I was waiting in the valet, because it was one of those places afterwards, I called my mom and I was like, I just pitched at CBS or whatever the fuck it was. And they said that you should be proud of me, Mom.
Listen, I don't even want to laugh at this. This is like...
It's really sad. It's so sad. Mom, I know you're listening. You should be proud of me, but probably not for that moment.
No, she should, for sure. Do you know who the executive was?
I don't remember.
Let's get him on.
We should. Oh, man. It would be worse if he remembered it. I think if he remembered
What if
that
he
pitch.
was like genuine? Like, no, seriously, your mom really must be proud of you.
I was also like, I was like 35 at the time. No, I was like,
oh my God.
No, I was like in my 30s. I feel like, I don't know.
Man, that's
fine.
a great story, though.
Anyways, well told Rhea pitch, not good. Next one, undeniable.
Undeniable. I use this often.
I hate this word.
I use it.
We use it to each other because it's such a handy sort of shorthand. My manager says this all the time. Oh, God. Do you want to take it? Because it makes me mad.
So basically, if someone says to you, is it undeniable? You have to look within your soul and ask if your script and your idea is an undeniable premise, idea. Was it so good that nobody can deny it?
Yes. Everyone will read it and think it's incredible.
Yeah.
And also, I think a part of undeniable means obvious. So something kind of we were talking about, I think it was last week, about being execution-based versus undeniable. So on the opposite spectrum of execution-based would be undeniable. This thing that is so obviously going to be a hit.
Right.
That we absolutely have to, like, even if I just pitch you the log line, you're like, yes, please.
Yeah.
That's also something that's undeniable.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Like, but I feel like that's all part of it. You know what, though? You're right. There's different elements. If you come up with an idea, it's like, is this an undeniable log line? And then there's a script where it's like, is this script undeniable?
Yeah.
Is this moment undeniable?
I mean, it's the pressure to put on a writer for that is obscene. Just do your best, guys. Just do your best to get it there.
It's really hard.
That's all you can do.
When you the weird thing is when you see an idea that's undeniable, like if you read something in Deadline or you go on IMDb and you read a log line,
yeah,
you just know. Like when you know, you know type thing. So it's hard to come up with that undeniable idea.
It's so true. Yeah, when you're out there in the world and you see a trailer or you read a log line somewhere of someone's script and you're like, oh, duh. That's so obvious. That's such a great idea.
Why didn't I come up with that? How did I miss this?
Yeah.
Next one is grounded.
We want a grounded sci-fi movie, Josh.
Grounded sci-fi. You know, the example that just came to my mind, although it's not a sci-fi movie, is the Christopher Nolan Batman.
Yeah.
Batman Beyond.
Sure.
That's a grounded take on
We want a
on
grounded
Batman.
superhero movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's grounded is essentially keeping something a little bit more realistic and natural.
Yeah. So I think like sci-fi grounded versus not grounded might be Ready Player One feels grounded because it feels lived in. It feels like this is maybe just like 10 minutes into the future, which is another phrase actually we can bring up here in industry terms, where it's not so far into the future we're in, God, what's a huge, ridiculous, like Fifth Element is so far into the future it doesn't look like our world at all. But Ready Player One resembles our world enough that we understand where characters are moving through. It feels like a neighborhood I've been in, or like it creates a sense of the real world. It's grounded. That's
Right.
what that means. Versus something that's so huge, it's so massive, it's so kind of way in the future or on another planet. Dune, for instance. Dune is grounded, though. Dune is so huge and crazy, and yet it's grounded in this family story. But the world is not necessarily grounded.
What about the newest Blade Runner?
No, that's just kind of gritty. It's not necessarily grounded.
But it feels very lived in, like you were saying. Like there's I think with sci-fi, the key is if you can incorporate elements that are, like if people just go home to a normal house, you're like, oh, that's like my house. There's some technology that's different, but like, you know what? Minority Report is like it's like grounded but futuristic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. I think like one that comes to mind for me of like crazy sci-fi that's definitely not grounded would be something like Jupiter Ascending, if you remember that movie.
Yeah.
The Wachowski brothers movie.
Yeah.
Cloud Atlas, like those movies that are just like so huge. If you watch Jupiter Ascending, just go watch the trailer of Jupiter Ascending. It's wacky, it's big, it's colorful, and then go watch the trailer for Ready Player One, which feels more like it kind of exists a little bit in our world. That's the difference between grounded and not grounded.
Yeah. Moving on, elevated. What does that mean, Tasha?
Elevated, it's just another word for be smarter. Elevated means, okay, I'm sorry, Josh. Fast and the Furious, not elevated. It's not.
What?
It's action, and it's very basic story, very basic theme of family, right? Versus something that's elevated, it's a bit more complex with the character dynamics and the character relationships and the themes, and the storytelling is a bit more complex.
Are you sure you've seen Fast and Furious?
But yeah, for me, another example might be like a Jason Statham movie, which I really enjoy. Okay. The Jason Statham action movies.
Who's also in Fast and Furious, but go on. Yes.
Also in Fast and Furious. Versus, say, John Wick. John Wick feels like an elevated action movie. I also think in a Jason Statham action movie, again, which I love, it's usually just like punch people, kill people, action-y, whatever, get to the next point. It's very plot driven, right? Whereas John Wick 1 in particular was very character driven, even though it was just jumping from action sequence to action sequence to action sequence. So on the surface, it's just like any number of Jason Statham movies. he's being driven because of his grief for his puppy and his wife.
Yeah.
So that's what elevates it, is every time he goes into an action sequence, you're feeling an emotion of like, fucking get those guys, because they killed your dog and they killed your last hope of being together with your wife. Whereas with a Jason Statham movie, I'm just like, yeah, this is fun action. Ooh, this is another fun action sequence. So that's like the nuance of an elevated action movie, for example. And that's usually where I hear it, just because I guess I work in this genre, is like, how do we make an elevated action sci-fi movie, an elevated action fantasy movie? And it just means be better. The next one is franchisable. Can we make this movie a franchise?
Yeah.
So you kind of got to know what that means when someone says that to you, which would be a great thing to say. But in our business currently, and it's been this way for a while, a lot of people are looking to bank on a series of movies set in this world rather than just one. So how do you make your one movie about a theme park with dinosaurs into a franchise that continues on after this first movie is over? And what's tough about this idea is it's hard enough to get one movie made. God bless you if you're able to get more movies made and jumpstart a franchise. Jesus, that's incredible. So you really do have to focus on making your first movie just so amazing, but also seed in elements that would allow it to become this huger, I don't know if that's a word. A huger thing.
No, it is. It's a word now. I write so much stuff that I always try to franchise everything.
Do you?
Yeah, like the thing is, I know this isn't good, by the way. I know because a lot of times it takes away from having a contained story where like someone dies at the end, or people go their separate ways or whatever it is. Like that, when you close the circle, you kind of take away the franchise. But I'll always write at the end of my movies, they'll always be like, want to go on one more mission?
You're right.
I don't think anyone should set out to write a movie for a franchise, but if you see the opportunity to throw some things
the
in.
one more mission hook is like a clever way to do it, right? It signifies that there are more adventures to tell within this world and with these characters. But I do think the key as a writer, the takeaway is just make characters who are amazing that we want to spend more time with. And then the second movie will follow. John Wick, we loved John Wick so much in the first movie. That was a kind of a closed circle movie, but we loved him so much that we wanted to spend more time with him and see him kick even more ass. And so we have 2 through 4. And we have Ballerina. We have all these spin-offs now that exist within the world because he also created this continental world, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right. That's what franchisable means. My head's kind of floating thinking about it. I want you to explain this next one. Hang a light on it.
Hang a light on it. Okay. Let's say, I actually use this a lot or hear this a lot. It comes up in writers' rooms all the time where someone suggests we should hang a light on something. And an example might be, Josh, you have a scene in one of your recent scripts where a father and daughter are sitting in a restaurant. And they're having a nice dinner and there's some tension involved. And at one point, the dad says something about, you're just like your mother. But then the conversation continues on. Like maybe your daughter character looks up at that and has a visual reaction. She acts a reaction, but then continues on with the conversation. And I might read that scene and be like, Josh, actually, I think you should hang a light on this mother thing. Like that's really interesting. So to hang a light on it is literally like, imagine the action of taking a lantern and like attaching it over the table in that moment. You're shining light on this moment. You're trying to make it bigger. So when I say hang a light on the mother moment, what I really mean is, Josh, can you make more of a meal? That's another term. Make more of a meal of the mother clearly plays a role in this daughter and father story. What is that? Have them talk about it. Have her not just react visually, but say something. Yeah. So that's what hang a light on is. It's like draw attention to it. Is really what it means. Shine a light on it.
Shine a light.
Hang a lantern. All those things.
Illuminate the moment.
Yes. Make it bigger.
I like that.
Which is the same thing as make a meal out of something, right? Make it Make it bigger, draw it out more. This is an interesting concept you have in here, but you've buried it. So hang a light on it, make a meal out of it.
I want to do an honorable mention.
Yeah.
Which I still get nightmares from.
Oh, no.
It's when I used to get your notes back.
Oh,
and
no.
then I would see CBB.
I would never do that. I would do that.
You did. I'm like, the fuck is CBB?
Oh,
What is
no,
CBB?
I'm terrible.
Hey, Dave, what does CBB mean? Could be better. I'm like, oh, no.
Snap.
Yeah.
Only because I love you and we're so close that I could just do that.
Yeah. And now I do it.
Oh, man. Could be better. It's a rough one. But also, like, it's such a handy shorthand because you're saying and I feel like you only do this when you know someone well.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, when you're giving somebody notes to defend you, when you're giving somebody notes, you can't, like, you're in the process of reading, you read something like, this moment's not working, this could be better, I'm going to come back to this, and then you keep going. Let's talk about this later. Like, that's where my brain's at. If I read something, I'm like, I don't know what the solution is, but this moment could be better. Let's talk about it.
And to be fair, I often use it for that. I often use it for dialogue. Like, it's usually not this whole scene could be better because then I feel like that's worthy of a conversation and not just do better, Josh. But if it's dialogue, like CBB, come on, do a pass on this dialogue and make it punchier, make it better. Ugh, I'm sorry. I'm a jerk.
CBB.
All right, those are some industry terms that we hear a lot. If you ever hear one that you don't know what it means or you want to add that to the list, send us an email at ActTwoWriters@gmail.com. We'd love to know what you're hearing out there and what's confusing or just weird.
Yeah.
Because there's some weird ones people come up with.
There's every once in a while you hear one that you're like, what?
There were some bonkers ones when I asked the producers in my tracking board, and I didn't bring a lot of them up here because they're so bonkers. Like, I haven't heard a lot of them.
You're right.
But they're really interesting. Like, maybe it's worth it this week in writing next week to just, like, bring up some of these interesting terms that people have brought up because as a writer, it's just it's kind of fascinating to hear how people think. And when they use these terms, it's usually because there's something else going on, and this is just a shorthand for them. That's kind of fun.
I love it.
Okay, quote of the day. Screenwriting is like ironing. You move forward a little bit, and you go back and smooth things out. Paul Thomas Anderson.
I love that. I love that one.
Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at Act2Writers for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram or on Twitter at Tasha 3.0.
I am Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram.
And as always, the Act 2 podcast is a production of Act 2, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist, music by 414 Bag, which you can find on Spotify.